It's funny. Uh, when you think back to like the Trump years, the first time around,
Yeah.
it all felt like a bit of a reality show, right?
Oh, totally. Like we'd watch it all unfold from up here in Canada, kind of like
Yeah.
it was entertainment, you know?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like that crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. You
Yeah.
know, he's saying all this wild stuff, but you never really think he means it.
Exactly. Like you'd never take him seriously, right?
Yeah, and there was always this sense that like whatever happened down there in the U.S., it wouldn't really affect us up here.
Yeah, like it can't happen here kind of thing.
Exactly. But now with Trump hinting at a comeback, it's starting to feel a little too real.
Yeah, it's like the joke's not so funny anymore.
Not at all. And I'll be honest, we were pretty vocal Trump supporters back then, but now those "Make America Great Again"
Yeah.
hats are like buried in the back of the closet.
Oh, yeah. I feel you on that one.
We're starting to wonder, did we really understand what we were supporting?
Yeah.
Like, what would a second Trump presidency actually mean for Canada?
It's a whole different ballgame now, isn't it?
It is. So let's unpack this. We've been looking at a bunch of reports and analyses about the potential impact of Trump 2.0 on Canada, and I guess to say it's making us a little nervous.
Yeah, well, the thing is, Canada and the U.S., they have this close relationship, right? But these reports are suggesting that things could get pretty messy, especially when it comes to trade and defense.
Yeah, let's start with trade. We all know the U.S. is Canada's biggest trading partner, but these reports put some pretty scary numbers on it. Like, did you know nearly 75% of Canada's exports go to the U.S.?
That's a massive amount.
It's a crazy amount. We're talking about $960.9 billion annually.
And that just goes to show how intertwined our economies really are. Anything that messes with that relationship is going to have a ripple effect across Canada.
And let's not forget about Trump's history, right? He slapped tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. He was constantly criticizing our trade practices, and he always seemed to be trying to renegotiate NAFTA to benefit America.
Exactly. Those weren't just empty threats. Those tariffs had real consequences. Canadian businesses and workers felt the impact, especially in industries like energy, automotive, and agriculture.
Right, and if we lose access to the U.S. market, or if it becomes way more difficult to trade, it could be devastating. We're talking about job losses, a weaker Canadian dollar, maybe even a recession.
It's a scary thought for sure.
It's like suddenly realizing that bridge you've been driving over every day might not be as sturdy as you thought.
And that sense of unease, it goes beyond just trade. Remember how Trump was always criticizing Canada for not spending enough on defense?
Oh yeah, he loved to call us freeloaders, right? Always going on about how we weren't meeting that 2% of GDP defense spending target that NATO sets.
Right. We're only at about 1.3% right now.
And while Canada's military is capable, it's relatively small. We rely heavily on the U.S. for things like NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command.
The one that protects our airspace.
Exactly.
And we can't forget about the Arctic either. It's becoming more and more strategically important as the ice melts.
Yeah, new shipping routes, resource potential, all that.
And the truth is, Canada would really struggle to defend its Arctic territory without help from the U.S.
So we've got trade vulnerabilities, defense dilemmas, and this increasingly important Arctic region where we might be outmatched. It's starting to feel like we're stuck in a geopolitical pressure cooker.
And it's not even just about direct threats from the U.S. Trump's actions and rhetoric have the potential to destabilize the whole North American region, and that's where things get even more complicated.
Yeah.
You got to think about the ripple effects. Remember when Trump talked about, like, bombing cartels in Mexico to deal with drugs?
Oh, yeah, it sounded like something straight out of an action movie.
It was wild, right?
Yeah.
But it does make you think, like, what happens in the U.S. doesn't just stay in the U.S.
Exactly. And we can't forget that Mexico is Canada's third largest trading partner.
Hmm.
Any disruption to U.S.-Mexico relations would definitely impact us.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Especially in sectors like automotive and agriculture. Those supply chains are all connected across North America.
Right, it's all a domino effect. One thing goes wrong and the whole continent feels it. So, okay, we've painted a pretty bleak picture here. Trade wars, defense, issues of volatile neighbor to the south, and the possibility of Trump coming back. What are we supposed to do? Start hoarding maple syrup and building bunkers?
Well, I wouldn't go that far just yet. But it does show that Canada needs to start thinking strategically.
Yeah.
We can't just assume everything's going to stay the same. We need to prepare for a world where things might be a lot different.
So what does that look like?
Well, for starters, Canada has been working on diversifying its trade partners. Making deals with other countries.
Right, like that CETA deal with the European Union and the CPTPP with Asia-Pacific nations.
Mm-hmm.
Are those going to be enough, though, if things go south with the U.S.?
Well, they're definitely a step in the right direction. It's smart to not have all our eggs in one basket. But let's be real, those deals can't fully replace the sheer volume of trade we do with the U.S. The U.S. is right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like trying to replace your best friend after a breakup. It takes time to build that kind of relationship.
Exactly. And just like in a breakup, sometimes you need to reevaluate what's important. What do we really need?
So are you saying Canada needs to step up its own game?
I think it's something we need to consider. Maybe it's time to boost defense spending. Maybe we need to focus on developing specific capabilities that are tailored to our own challenges, like Arctic patrol vessels or better cybersecurity.
So we're talking about investing in our own security, not just relying on the U.S. to take care of us.
Right. And maybe even deepening alliances with other countries, countries that share our values and interests, like the UK, Australia, maybe even Japan. It's about having options, just in case that close relationship with the US goes sour.
Okay, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. There's been some talk about the A-word annexation.
I know, it sounds crazy.
It does. But with Trump's America First attitude and the way he treats alliances, some people are worried that he might actually try to make Canada part of the U.S.
I get it. I mean, with Trump, you never know what he's going to do, right? But let's be realistic, annexation is pretty much impossible. There are so many political, legal, and cultural barriers. It would be a nightmare. It would never happen. Canada has its own identity, its own sovereignty. Any attempt at annexation would be met with huge resistance from Canadians, from our leaders, from the whole world.
So it's more of a what-if scenario than a real threat.
Exactly. But even as a what if, it highlights something important. Canada needs to be ready to stand on its own 2 feet.
To not just assume that the U.S. will always be there for us or that they'll always have our best interests at heart.
Right. It's like realizing that your parents aren't superheroes. They can't protect you from everything. You need to grow up and learn to take care of yourself.
So while we might have laughed at Trump before, maybe it's time to get serious and ask ourselves some tough questions. Like, what kind of country do we want to be? How do we protect ourselves in a world that's becoming more and more unpredictable?
Yeah, it really does feel like we went from watching this reality show to actually being in it.
And like, not even in a fun way.
Right. It's more like a political thriller now.
Yeah, and the worst part is we were like rooting for the bad guy a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we're starting to realize maybe he's not the hero we thought he was.
Talk about a plot twist.
But that's what this deep dive is all about, right? We're facing the facts, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they make us question what we used to believe.
And I think for Canadians, this is a real turning point. Maybe it's time to stop with the whole America's hat thing and start taking ourselves a bit more seriously.
It's like we woke up from a dream and realized the world is a lot scarier than we thought.
But you know what? Maybe that's a good thing. Because once you see the danger, you can start preparing for it.
So instead of freaking out, we should be focusing on how to be more self-reliant.
Exactly. We can't control what happens in the U.S., but we can control how we react to it.
It's like Trump is this giant wake-up call telling us to get our act together.
To stop being complacent and start taking charge of our own future.
Yeah, maybe instead of being America's hat, we can be the maple leaf maverick.
Independent, resourceful, ready for anything.
I like the sound of that.
Me too.
Well, on that note of cautious optimism, I think we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us at this deep dive. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, the future is in our hands.